Big gigantic project that they were involved in worldwide was to eradicate polio and
we've almost done it.
that's right. Now that is nothing to sneeze at, right? This is an incredible worldwide organization. I don't even know how many million people are involved. And there's this Rotarian Action Group for Peace. They're headquartered over in Oregon, and we've been partnering up with them to try to get our message in front of Rotaries. And so our doctors have gone out, I've gone out and spoken to, I went and spoke to Bethesda Rotary here in Maryland. Our doctors have gone to Rotaries in a bunch of different states and given presentations. Some of our leaders will actually be going to Sao Paulo for the Rotary International meeting that's coming up next month. And we're looking to try and get Rotary International involved. But you know, Rotary, the thing about Rotary is it's reaching beyond the choir. Right? People in Rotary are your mainstream mom-and-pop businesses on Main Street, and we are looking to get them involved and get them to talk to their elected officials. And, we need to surface this, not just in the media, but within organizations. And yes?
Let me just say, that's why I joined Rotary about 3 years ago, and I'm really glad I did because they are getting involved in some of these things I'm telling them about. The Cypress Friendship Program that I'm doing. There's a lot of potential there. Think about joining Rotary.
I gave you a fat pitch, didn't I? That's what you call a fat pitch. And I brought the postcards. I was talking about writing, and everyone can take a postcard. This is to Obama. Yeah. This is asking the president, please seek an agreement with Russia to take the nuclear weapons of both nations off of prompt launch status, to lessen the potential of an utter catastrophe. I mean, that nuclear famine scenario was just 0.5% of the arsenals. So if Russia and the United States went at it, it'd be really bad. And then coming up, oops, went overboard there. Coming up this year will be this. This is another reason why 2015 is really a pivotal year, is that this is the 70th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. And even if groups like us, like WILF and PSR, and groups like yours, even if we didn't do anything to draw attention to it, the media would still be all over the fact that it's the 70th anniversary of Hiroshima. However, this is going to be the granddaddy of media waves, in my opinion. It's going to be a great opportunity. And the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference ends in May. We've asked nicely of the nuclear weapons states to come clean on their commitments. If they have not, then we are expecting by the end of the year there will be some sort of meeting internationally to start the ban treaty. So that could be in the news by the time August 6th rolls around. I don't know what all goes on here in Maryland around Hiroshima Day.
Baltimore has done one for 30 years. We're going to be doing the 31st, August 6th and 9th, so everybody should stay in touch. We'll give you all the details.
Fantastic opportunity to get into the local, get in front of local people, promote this message that there's an international movement happening, and get in the media. If you work, you'll be able to get the media to turn out to the Hiroshima event.
And almost for 30 years, we've had a boxer here with us, and if you haven't been in the presence of somebody that's actually suffered from the bomb, it's a mystical experience, to say the least.
They know what they're talking about.
Exactly, and they've gone over to see that Enola Gay at Woodward Hazy Museum, and I've been with them when they've been there, and again, it's remarkable. They can't even believe that plane is still there, and they're in its presence, and what happened to them and their families.
There was a student who contacted me, an American student, and she was heading over to Hiroshima, and she asked me for some background information about the story and what's happening with disarmament. And in return, I told her, I've never been to Hiroshima, but there is a plaque there at what they call the cenotaph. Have you ever been there, Art? Have you been to Hiroshima? There's a plaque where there's a mass grave of human remains, and then they built a memorial over the top of it, and there's a plaque there. And I was curious about exactly what did it say. And what it basically said, and so this student very kindly took a photo of it on her iPhone and emailed it to me. So now I know what it actually says. And it says, "Rest in peace, for the evil will not be repeated." Well, I think we owe that to them. You know, we owe that to all those people who were bombed, not even just the nuclear bombs. All those people who were bombed in World War II. That we need to think like we can get beyond this. That was in the past. We're in a new millennium now. We don't do that kind of stuff anymore. So I like to think. And of course, we do this because of these little squirts. And I thank you for whatever you can do to be a part of this campaign. Don't forget that we can whip this thing. We need to whip this thing. It needs to be fixed so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with it. And is there any time for questions? Thanks for taking pictures, Art, and for taking pictures, Will. Okay, let me start ladies first.
You said there was an alert that has words, the particular words of that alert, that the bombs are on this level of alert now.
Well, yeah, I mean, are you asking about the alert status?
Yeah, I want to know what the actual status is, so I can write it down.
Well, it's called, the phenomenon that we're trying to stop is called prompt launch status. Okay. So in the case of the United States, there's 450 Minuteman missiles that are ICBMs. They're in silos, you know, in the middle of the United States. And those weapons are solid fueled rockets, which means that you don't have to fuel them up. They're ready to go. All you have to do is turn a couple keys. You know, a couple of launch officers need to turn a couple keys. They need to get the authorization to do that. They need to get the right code to do that. To tune those keys, those weapons can go. Once they get the order, they can launch them probably in less than a minute, maybe a couple minutes. That's prompt launch. The problem with that is that what if there's a false warning, which has happened, and which shows up in that book I was talking about.
Russia just had one in recent years and did not retaliate because they thought it was a mistake. And it was.
You know, I'm looking forward to seeing that film. There's a film about the officer who made the decision not to go up through the command chain. You're familiar with it?
We showed it.
This guy's amazing. You come up here.
Art Wilhelm, well, if you're pointing at me, I have a couple of comments and I have a question for you.
Well, let me make sure I answer that question. Did I answer that question?
Front launch status.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That's what we're trying to fight, and both Russia and the United States have that. And in the event of a false alarm, it's extremely dangerous because they're ready to launch way too fast.
Yeah.
It would be all right to think about it before you launch these things. And, you know, the Russians, especially back when Reagan was president, they were extremely spooked because there were weapons that could hit them like within 10 minutes. It might take them 8 minutes to figure it out. Then you just don't have enough time to decide what you're going to do. So taking them off prompt launch status, especially when we're not in any kind of war footing right now, would be good. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah?
We did send a student to Hiroshima last year.
Oh.
As part of the commemoration. He's actually with Maryland Institute College for Art, so he's one of the people I'm going to be contacting about the contest, because that's a special video, and we're hoping he will be speaking and describing his trip this year for the gathering.
That'd be cool.
Also, I have to mention I have three friends in prison right now because they believe that nuclear weapons are madness, and they're suffering the consequence for making this very brave speech. The one that's going to be getting out fairly soon, Sister Megan Rice, has been getting a tremendous amount of publicity, front page of New York Times, etc. The other thing I would urge everybody to watch, if you haven't seen it yet, John Oliver, 19 minutes. He explains it all. It's on YouTube. Don't miss this presentation. All the madness, it's right in these 19 minutes. And I was at the Climate Chaos March in New York, 9/21/14. Anywhere from 300 to 400,000 people. Lots of less mature people were there. Many had anti-nuke signs and anti-war signs. The big question, though, I have to ask you, I ask everyone that comes into town. I was there with 1 million people, and we couldn't get into Central Park on June 12th, 1982, which you said that's when you started. Where have all those people gone? Where are they? I know there's actuary tables, but why are people not working on this issue? As Phil Berrigan say, this is the issue we have to work on. If you have any comments on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, that's, of course, that's why I'm here, okay? Some of them, you're in this room, so there's one accounted for. And this has been out of the news. It's been out of the news. And honestly, I think that if you interview people on the street, they would be flabbergasted to find out there's over 15,000 nuclear weapons still. I think because it's so little is it ever talked about, unless it's Iran's nuclear bombs or North Korea's nuclear bombs, they get talked about. But these gigantic arsenals simply don't get in the news, and we're trying to get in. That's one of our goals is to counter that with these media waves. But I think in spirit, I think once you get what nuclear weapons are and what they're about, you never go back. I don't think that those folks who marched in New York in 1982 are now complacent about nuclear weapons or think that they're okay. You know what I mean? They're still against nuclear weapons, but they probably don't know about this campaign I've been talking about, right? A lot of it's been happening offshore, so you just don't. We need to get in the news more, and then those folks will come forward. I'm sure they're still with us. Okay.
Iran, there's so much fuss about the possibility of their getting nuclear weapons, but they have actually proposed a nuclear-free Middle East. But of course, Israel does not want to go on with that. You possibly know that in 1973, the Yom Kippur War, that Israel actually threatened to use their nuclear power against Egypt because they were actually losing that war. But then the U.S. agreed to airlift this massive amount of weaponry over to them, and they won. But they had their nukes ready to go. So I think they and North Korea are possibly the two countries who are most likely to use those weapons.
Israel and North Korea?
Right.
Unless there's an accident or a misunderstanding,
Yeah.
Well, and India and Pakistan as well. They have fights all the time. I didn't know that. I didn't know that specific detail about the Yom Kippur War, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I have good news.
What?
I'm happy to convey good news. There was a 64-step program to strengthen the NPT that emerged from the 2010 review conference. You've heard me talk a lot about the NPT. It's really on my mind right now because I was in New York last week, and then because that conference is happening right now. So there's a 64-point action plan. One of the most important, one of the ones that's gotten the most noise and commotion is the Middle East nuclear weapons-free zone. Right? So there are a lot of nations, Egypt in particular has really been pushing hard, and they are upset that hasn't gotten going, that ball hasn't gotten rolling. Here's another piece of good news that totally took me by surprise. This year, for the first time, Israel is participating in the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference with an observer status. Okay, we'll take it. It's kind of like when the United States and Great Britain went to the Vienna conference. All right, they were kind of dragged, kicking and screaming to it, and they didn't really constructively help that much. But they went because they get it. And something's happening with Israel. I don't know what, but boy, after all that drama with Netanyahu coming and speaking to Congress and all that, this really took me by surprise that they're, so perhaps they will become subject to the NPT. That would be a good thing. Yeah.
A couple of things that are questions here. There, I guess, maybe clarifications or updates on news. Number one is, what do you know about public opinion surveys, both in the USA and in the European nuclear powers? Like, how are we? Any idea on how we're doing overall? Public opinion surveys there.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I seem to remember that sometime in the last couple of years there was at least like some editorials in some of the major newspapers written by a large group of former leaders, like maybe even Kissinger and
Yeah.
George Shultz.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, so the first question was about polling, which makes me sad because that's a slide I took out. I mean, you notice I went through a lot of slides here, but that's one that came out, which was my polling data I had. Because it's kind of old, I think the polling data I have is maybe from 2009, something like that. It's not super current, and PSR can't afford to do that kind of polling, but last polling I saw, every single nation that was polled, and that included nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states, there was only one where public opinion was less than 50% for getting rid of the nuclear weapons, and that was Pakistan. All the other nations, including the United States and Russia, and the NATO countries, all of them were well over 50% and hovering around 70% on average. So, well, that depends on, which nation you're in. But back in the freeze days, I seem to recall, there was polling regularly showing 75% support for the freeze among American citizens. Once again, you kind of have to get over the hump of they have no idea that there's these huge arsenals. Okay, the second thing was about what we call the Four Horsemen. So that's Henry Kissinger. Okay, so newsflash is Henry Kissinger, the guy who wrote Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy, which I read when I was a student in college, and it scared me very badly. Anyway, that guy, and okay, so then it was Hank Perry, former Secretary of Defense, and Sam Nunn, former chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and George Shultz, who was Secretary of State under Reagan. Those four are involved in a group, it's called something like the Stanford Group, and they have these Stanford conferences, and they talk about problems to do with world security, and way back, I think the first one was in 2007, those four elder statesmen published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, nice choice, right? They didn't put it in the Nation. See what I'm saying? The people who read the Nation, they didn't need to hear from Kissinger and Shultz that nuclear weapons are bad. They went for the Wall Street Journal and said, you know what? These things have outlived their usefulness, and they're not making us secure anymore. And as the world situation develops, they're just going to cause more and more risk to the United States. It's time to start getting rid of them. And to see somebody like Kissinger attaching his name to the idea of a nuclear weapons-free world. So then, subsequently, like every year, maybe every other year, they've been publishing again in the Wall Street Journal. Obama, right after he was elected, he invited these four into the White House, and they gave him a briefing, and that had a lot to do with his famous Prague speech in 2009, where he got up in Prague and said, the United States, with conviction, is working towards a world free of nuclear weapons. So we need to hold him accountable to that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Except I'll just say on top of that, this is another case where once again the overwhelming popular support for something is not, there's nothing actually happening anywhere in the halls of the power. And it's all, I think, because of moneyed interests.
I agree with the sentiment that you just expressed. However, factually, when the United States public is for disarmament, when the world community is for disarmament, and the United States continues, even after a president announced 6 years ago now, that he was for a nuclear weapons-free world, now we are planning to spend $348 billion on modernizing and upkeeping this nuclear arsenal that should go in the trash bin. There is something happening in the halls of power, and what's happening is money is flowing, and people are happy. They are sending their kids to Yale, and they are building swimming pools in their backyards, and why would they want that to stop? The money is flowing. And honestly, those are the folks that I don't think it's justice. Justice is part of your name, of this organization. That is unjust for some people to line their pockets and send their kids to Ivy League schools by selling this crap to the United States Congress and having taxpayers pay to make our lives more dangerous. Sorry, but there's this little soapbox speech that makes me very upset. And I told you that it's an affront to me. Thank you. it's an affront to me that this wasn't dealt with before I was born, but it's never too late. You know, we gotta do it. Gotta do it.
Great, great.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Gift for you.
And before you lay that on me, whatever that might be, I have PSR brochures, hint, hint. So Art and I would really love it if someone here in the room decided that they are so inspired they want to join PSR. So I'm going to put them, where am I going to put them? I'm going to probably put them back in the back. Okay.
Thank you very much. We have a small gift for you. A piece of gold and a piece of sign.
Oh.
It's a nuclear free sign.
I will find a place for that. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, man, invite me more often. Invite me more often. I'll plug that stuff. Do we need to plug in the other computer? I can do that too.
No, you just,
Okay. Extract.
it's right to the extract.
Extract. Look,
So I gotta get a picture of you with those two things.
you want to get a picture of me shaking hands with Paulette?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we would all jump
Can
down.
hold up.
Photo op.
Somebody,
Photo op.
somebody can hold up that.
Photo op. Photo op. Photo op. Wash your hands, stop.
Might have to improve with all that. Where that light coming from?
Oh, is this bad?
Yeah.
It's distracting.
There, look at the kids. I don't want to stop.
Hold that beef ball so we can see that beef ball.
Up in the air, up in the air.
There you go.